City of Northglenn, Channel 8, keeping you informed of events in your community.
Let's bring the study session to order.
Yeah, we should make sure.
Joanna, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Downing.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Carol Dodge.
Here.
Councilmember Snetzinger. Here. Councilmember Mullican.
Here.
Councilmember Wayne Dodge.
Here.
Councilmember Brown.
Where is he?
Councilmember Carrico.
Here.
Councilmember Whitman.
Here.
Councilmember Winnicky.
Here.
Thank you. First, I'll turn this over to you for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah, Mayor, if it's all right with the council, what I'd like to do is just take a minute to introduce our newest, or not our newest employee, but one of our newest employees, the new special events supervisor. And Paula, if you would want to
Sure.
do the honors.
I think he's a familiar face to many of you, but Stephen Stokes has joined us, which we are thrilled to have him back as our special event supervisor. We just want to take a few minutes tonight to show his face and let you know that we are up and running and we're going to meet the requests of council. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Stephen, if you'd like to do a dance, a song.
Sure, all those good things.
I've seen him dance.
It's not.
How pretty is the runway, you know, in
Yeah,
front of us, so if you don't try.
do a talent show, that'd be great. Well, it's great to be in front of you, and I know that the interest of council to have larger events in the city of Northglenn and more additional events is the reason that this position was created and that I was hired. So I very much appreciate that you all have that idea to have additional events, and I'm very excited to be here. For those that don't know, I did work for the city of Northglenn before for 5 years, and then the last 7 years I've been owning my own event management company. And my company's primary goal, we spent a lot of time and energy creating events for people, 3,000. Really, every event we did was 3,000 people or more, except for a few side events, and we focused on large festivals, fairs, and community events. And so I think it's a perfect time for me to be back here at the city of Northglenn to assist in the planning of 3 new events, 1 this year and 2 next year. And I look forward to doing that. I've learned a lot in the last 7 years, and I'm happy to be back and be able to use some of that training and wisdom to bring the events to bear. So that being said, I just invite you, my office is upstairs. Obviously, if you have questions or I know you have ideas that you want to have added to the events, that you let me know so that I can add those in and that we can make the events that the community can be really proud of and that you can be proud of. So more than anything, I just really wanted to come by and say hello and make sure that you knew who I was. And I look forward to planning great events for the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait, I want to add a little factoid, Stephen.
What's that?
I think it was in today's paper where they were talking about events in the cities in Metro Denver.
Yeah.
And it said Aurora has 5 signature events, and including 4th of July, and it's under 200,000. I thought there has got to be something wrong with the figure or the number, because, I mean, how could you possibly have 5 signature events for less than 200,000?
I think one of their signature events would probably be Kids Free, which has a rather small budget. Unless an event gets really popular, like July 4th Family Festival has gotten really popular, a lot of people come to it. Events have kind of a lifeline, a timeline. Kids Free used to be one, it was a signature community event, and it's just lost some steam. I know one of their other signature events would be in Aurora Business District. They have an Aurora Arts Festival, and that entire budget was maybe $10,000. We did some consulting with them last year. So I think that signature events probably has a lot of flexibility.
I was just surprised. It said 5 in Aurora.
Aurora, yeah.
Golden had. Oh my God, I can't even remember that number. Yeah. July number.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So, and events can, I can answer that question more. I'm not certain how they do it. Some events do produce more revenue than others, so it's possible that 200,000 was provided by the city of Aurora for the events, but in addition, an event produces an additional 50,000 in income that may not be included in the actual money that was provided by the city. That would be my guess. I'm only guessing.
just was a weird statistic to me,
Yeah,
so.
it'd be interesting to know more about that.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay. Now we'll move to citywide sustainability assessment. And I think we're set.
It's crowded up here tonight, so I'm just going to sit off to the side here, but we have the EPS and MIG team, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of recap from last week, and then wrap up the retail, and we're going to go into a more engaged process of Q&A with you guys and trying to get some feedback. So with that, I'll
All right.
hand it over.
Thank you, Brooke. So it's good to be back. I'm Andrew, and with me is Chris Ryerson and Michelle Chung with EPS, and Jay Rinkins with MIG.
How's your car, Jay?
Got good stuff. Thank you. Not getting an accident on the way here. So it's good.
That's good news. Good news. So hopefully you'll make it through tomorrow's school. So we have, let's click to the first slide. And we are right here with the red bar around our schedule. This is a calendar that goes from December of 2014 through October of 2015. That's our goal, is to be able to cover all of this material in less than a year. And as you can see, we're still near the early stages of the overall process. One of the challenges that we have in this process is to suspend our overall direction and our decision making until we're near this end of the overall schedule. We have what we like to call a divergent part of the process where we're expanding out in terms of covering all of the various issues, and we will turn the corner and start to converge and have a convergent process to become very specific. One of our goals, and Brooke and Travis have both emphasized this a fair amount in our meetings with them, is a ranking, like a very clear-cut ranking of what are the opportunities and why are these opportunities ranked the way they are. So ultimately, we want to have a lot of closure, but not right now, and in fact, not tonight. So we want to brainstorm, we want to keep it high level, and ultimately, we will get there. We will get there, but the goal is to keep it fairly general. The factors that are going into this are the land supply, the market. You know, what does the market support relative to what the land supply offers and the supply and demand there? And ultimately, how do we balance fiscal policy? What are the options around fiscal policy? What are the different land use scenarios on the opportunity sites? And ultimately, how do we sustain the level of service with Northglenn so we're sure that we've got a trajectory that's sustainable into the future? So what we're ultimately going for is, within these parameters, how do we address all three of our goals? And we have this Venn diagram that we're going to see a lot of over the course of the project. Tonight, we're going to touch on some of the market. We have the industrial, the multifamily, and the office, fairly straightforward. We touched on those last time. We are going into a lot of detail on the retail. Retail is critical in terms of any kind of fiscal analysis, because obviously sales tax drives much of any municipal budget. But retail also is tricky just because there's a lot of factors in terms of what's supportable, and Chris will be going into more detail. Basically, we've completed an inflow-outflow analysis. So we've quantified leakage, we've quantified inflow, and we've done it by store type, so we know generally where the opportunities are and where they're not. We also, Jay is going to take us through a prototyping workshop where we've got this board over here against the wall. By the end of the evening, hopefully we will have captured a lot of discussion from this group in terms of what's going to work and what we should pursue. So in terms of the overall project challenge and goal, some of the specifics that we got from the interviews at the beginning of the project: increased fiscal revenue, create a strong pulse. Those are direct words used by several of the different members of council in URA. Third, generate a strong place that people from Northglenn will be proud to say they live and work here. Then in terms of our goal and where we're headed, the priority sites, we talked about clarity and specificity, all leveraging the market, fiscal benefit, catalytic impact. How does the city and NURA focus its resources so there's a ripple effect, and also increase civic amenity and quality of life. So this is a tall order, but we like the challenge, and we'll take it 1 month at a time and see ultimately provide some results along these lines. So in terms of a review of the market factors, summary of observations in terms of the residential. Residential has become a larger piece of the puzzle. One of the first impressions that we heard when we started the project, and some of what was articulated in the interviews, is that the market is passed Northglenn by, and the available land is gone, we're built out, and the activity is further north, further east, further outside Northglenn. However, residential is very interesting. Almost 1,500 multifamily units built since 2000. That's a fair amount of activity, including a project that's just finishing up now. In the single-family end of things, most of that was built in the 60s and 70s. Not a major project built since 2010. In fact, Fox Run, most of the single-family development built since 2000 was right close to that 2000 timeframe. So, in terms of that product type, not a lot of activity. Multifamily, there is a lot of activity. Prices are strong. Citywide average 128, which is slightly higher than the corridor as a whole. However, there's a wide range of rents, and when you start calling these individual projects, you understand that some of these developments are actually getting very high price per square foot, including one on 120th up around 230 a square foot for some of its product type. DUS is right around downtown Denver Union Station, the product right in that immediate area. Their average is right around 230. Now, this is the range, 170 to 230, shows that the high end of the range in the Northglenn market is comparable to the average in Denver Union Station. But Denver Union Station is red hot. And not only are the rents strong there, but the recent sales of product there by institutional investors, insurance funds, things like that, are comparable to what we're seeing on the coasts. So these prices are very strong. And accordingly, people want to be in Northglenn. They want to be on the North I-25 corridor. They want to be closer in than further out. There is a sweet spot here that we can see in these numbers. That's all good news in terms of being able to work with the market. We thought that almost 1,400 units were a little high, a little strong, so we mapped out where they're located. This is a single family in Fox Run. The rest of these, and the bubble size is proportional to the unit size, and we can get into that if people have questions about exactly where. Industrial also is very interesting. It's all good. Lease rates are increasing, vacancy is decreasing. It is dated. We've got a dated inventory, but it's very strong. Average lease rates in 2014 were $648 a month, triple net per square foot. The corridor as a whole, North I-25 corridor, $536. This difference, 20% premium for the industrial space here in Northglenn. That's significant. And then working with Debbie Tuttle, she's tracking the status and has scrubbed CoStar specifically for Northglenn. Fourth quarter 2014 vacancy rates, 0.6%. I don't know exactly how you achieve 0.6%, but clearly the market likes it here for industrial. Office is a little mixed. The vacancy rate is actually less than the corridor-wide vacancy rate, but the lease rates are also a little lower. So a little mixed in terms of what the market is telling us on office in Northglenn. We do know that the inventory on the whole is smaller, so that might be a little tougher, but nonetheless, there are some strengths elsewhere. Retail. Chris is going to take this, and we may do a little tag team. Walk him
So retail was the one category we didn't go through in detail last time, and we promised we would go into much more detail this time. And the first couple slides are just there so that we don't talk about retail in just sort of a monolithic way as one thing. There's really kind of a breakdown in terms of the way we think about it. And so we wanted to just go over those categories real quickly. They're very common sense categories that'll make sense to you. But just so that you know kind of how we do our analysis and what categories we're looking at. So the first of those, when we break down retail sales, is convenience goods. These are the everyday necessities, convenience stores, buying a couple things at the gas station, grocery stores, things like that, as well as things like Walgreens, personal care, things like that. A really big category is shoppers goods, which are broken down into two subcategories. The first of those is general merchandise. And these are, the traditional department stores, discount department stores, super warehouses, things that sell a huge variety of goods and are generally quite large, usually over 100,000 square feet. The other part of shoppers goods are sort of these other shoppers goods, which are those collections of mass merchandisers, mid-boxes, and even smaller stores that sell a little more specific type of goods. So they focus on sporting goods, or they focus on music, things like that. Go ahead. So then the last two categories are eating and drinking, which is exactly what it sounds, and it really covers the full spectrum of those, from large and small restaurants to places where you would just go have a drink, nightlife, things like that. And then finally, building material and garden goods can be both the big Home Depots and Lowe's down to the little local neighborhood Ace Hardware. That kind of thing. So those are the categories that we analyze when we do these. And the next two slides really try to condense all the analysis that we did using the city sales tax data and other sources that we have into a few main takeaways for you. So this first section is we're talking about retail expenditure potential, which, as I mentioned last time, is a simple concept. We just look at the number of households and the average household income, either in a current year or looking out into future years. And we can say, based on that, here's how much you would expect the residents of Northglenn to spend on retail, given typical patterns. So when we do that analysis, we find that Northglenn currently captures about 40% of resident spending, which of course means that 60% from our analysis is lost to stores outside of Northglenn. And when we look at those numbers, that loss, that leakage is primarily in those convenience goods like groceries and Walgreens and things like that, as well as the shoppers goods. And although we don't get down to store by store detail in the sales tax data, a big part of that shoppers good number is likely the big box stores, the Walmarts, the Costco's, and things like that.
How do these numbers compare to other cities? How is Northglenn doing compared to other cities losing in that 40-60?
A market that is about as self-contained as it can be would be Boulder, for example. Not only is it geographically independent, but it's pretty much fully stored within its environment. It can achieve, when we did a retail study in Boulder, we were seeing about 80% capture and 20% leakage. Because regardless of where you are, dollars will flow to other markets for specialty goods or for what have you, other kinds of things, and you never can achieve 100%. So that would be kind of on the optimal end of the spectrum.
So potentially we're missing out on about 40% is what you're saying, best case scenario?
Yeah, if there's 60% leakage, yeah. The 20 is optimal, and at 60, there's a 40% delta. And just to emphasize what Chris was just saying, these data points right here reflect what's going on with the households. Because the dollars, retail follows rooftops, if you will, and these are dollars in the rooftops. This is another way of looking at it, and these are dollars in the stores. These are the store activity. So this is all commercial-based analysis, and then this is basically residential-based analysis.
So I guess same question on the 50-50 then. I mean, did you do that same analysis on Boulder for the
inflow?
Yeah.
We did, and I don't have it at my fingertips.
Okay.
Obviously, the more inflow you can get, the better. And there are some very unique communities in Colorado that are tourism-based, that their inflow is huge. Any of the ski resort communities would be that way. But that's, anytime you can get greater inflow is the holy grail of any kind of retail strategy. And we'll track that number now and get it for you just so that grounded in reality.
For next time, we could, do our best to pull together a couple of our previous studies from other communities, just to give you that.
Okay, I'm just curious of like, what's a
Yeah.
goal to shoot for,
Yeah.
you know? What should we be trying to
Yeah.
meet?
It's interesting. It's interesting, and I think context is really important because to be able to set policy, just understanding that's the kind of the framework of the issue. That said, every market is going to move, but I think that's a good goal, and we'll have some studies from around Colorado, including Denver. We did a big one for Denver, for the city county of Denver, and we'll pull in some other states just to show kind of a mix.
If you don't have a big, like say for a key super within your city, the figures are skewed because you have brand loyalty, you have things about the economy that, are going to change when the economy's great. People go to the brand that they love. Some people love to shop at King Supers. Some people love to shop at Safeway. And you don't have either of those. Is it obvious you're going to not be able to draw what you should be able to draw?
Well, in the store
Talk
types.
about Boulder.
Yeah.
Boulders is self-contained. They got everything.
Right, and it's important to think about all of this by store type because there's certain store categories where those sales per square foot will get much higher than grocery, and ultimately.
I mean, it's just that one sector, grocery.
Oh, just in grocery.
Yeah, but you could say the same thing for foods
Right.
as well. Right. Coals or.
Right. Yeah, there's certainly customer allegiance to different types.
Yeah, I mean that has to be factored in.
Yes.
Andrew, I might suggest that maybe for future discussion is a better understanding of like a health grade in terms of our existing condition against our fiscal policy and also what our needs are moving forward.
That's a good. I like that.
So I think it's more putting it into context is how does that affect our ability to be fiscally sustainable for the long term, and what can we do to help that?
I like
I
that.
think it's also benchmarking on what other communities are, like Kyle said, that's kind of what we want to know is, well, how are we doing against Thornton? They're losing this much, and, how are we just doing compared to other people?
Right.
Not necessarily, I think Boulder isn't a very good example for
Right.
us because they are self-contained.
Right.
Whereas we are completely surrounded by other communities where everybody goes outside of those communities, especially when it's across the street here in this community, for much of our shopping areas.
Right. And it's what's healthy for a community like Northglenn that's so integrated into several other municipal jurisdictions, all part of the same market.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of question than other communities that are either completely standalone or what have you. Just one caveat in terms of what we can come back with data is it doesn't depend in part on data sources. And so we've got, because obviously Northglenn is the client here, we've got access to more detailed analysis of the numbers. There are higher level sets of data that we can get from the state for every community. And we may be able to look at those in terms of providing something that applies to all communities and tailor a set that's more reflective of Northglenn. For the ones that show it on this level of detail, and we've got a table that shows the level of detail we've gone to, we're gonna, why don't you just jump down 2 slides if you want. So, we try to keep the tables to a minimum, but this is one out of a dozen tab model that shows you the level of detail we get into. And what we've done is that we parse it out by store type, and then we look at it in terms of the actual sales flows. So this kind of analysis we're happy to share for all of the former studies that we've done. There may be other metrics that we can share that will be more representative of North N.5, Denver Metro as a whole. Why don't you go back?
Okay, that one. So, as we head through the analysis, some of the other, sort of initial conclusions that we're able to make, and as Andrew said, there's so many moving pieces and moving factors with these. These are really just kind of general initial sort of conclusions and ideas. But when we look at projected retail demand for Northglenn over the next 20 years, based just simply kind of on typical projected household growth, it would be about 116,000 square feet, which would be about 7% or so of created kind of a little larger trade area, and hopefully you can see it here in the green. In the gray is the larger North I-25 corridor that we sort of talked about as a market area last time. It was a little bit too broad for the retail analysis, and so we kind of isolated this sort of central portion that Northglenn could realistically draw retail sales from. So that 116,000 is about 7% of the projected retail sales within that entire trade area. The 352,000 square feet is sort of a higher end range that we might be using in our analysis, that we're looking to in our analysis, as sort of the high range that Northglenn could get to if strategies are devised to sort of start increasing that amount of capture. What some of you were talking about a few minutes ago, which is how do we recapture some of those sales? How do we draw more inflow? How do we reduce the leakage?
In general, what we're seeing here, the approach we like to take on these studies is to bracket the analysis. This is the baseline, and this is most likely to happen as long as everyone's paying attention. This is likely to happen, and this is through a planning horizon of 2035. So it's quite a long planning horizon. And then on the upside, 350,000. If capture can be increased, and especially, and this is the biggest challenge, is if we can align supportable square footage with store type and actual brands of who we can get to come to Northglenn. That's a little challenging, and I don't want to get ahead of where we are on the slideshow, but much of those store locations have already been set on the North I-25 market.
Absolutely. So just to recap, really household growth can only drive retail sales to that certain degree, and there is going to have to be that retail strategy to capture more of that area spending. So some of our initial kind of thoughts and conclusions, just thinking about retail, that are going to guide our analysis as we move forward, are just, as Andrew was just talking about, planning strategically to increase that capture and inflow. Some of the options there are, increasing the number of households near the TOD stations that are, coming online soon, increasing the vitality around those stations, which helps to increase, retail sales. And then also thinking about a diverse mix of household types, being able to attract a more diverse mix of retail types. Thinking about that, targeting the right mix of retail types, convenience goods are a great thing to think about, those grocery stores and things like that, because they do increase vitality, they increase trip generation, and they help drive sales at other types of retail. So those kinds of goods where people are kind of going every day or once a week or a couple times a week really help drive those other retail sales because people are right there anyway. Maybe they stop in to that other store. And then another promising kind of area to focus on would be lifestyle and entertainment uses, because again, you're drawing people to the movies, you're drawing people to entertainment or eating and drinking. They're there near those other stores that increase that chance of being able to increase retail sales.
One thing I just want to mention about the Lifestyle Center is that about 10, 12 years ago, a new retail format came out on the scene and everyone got real excited about it. And we called it the Lifestyle Center. And generally what it is are a collection of stores without the anchors. And what the market was perceiving 10, 15 years ago was that the traditional anchors were not doing so well. And as we know in all the news that's coming out now, Target, I mean Target too, but Target, Sears, JCPenney, all these various big classic anchors that have been for decades and decades, the anchors of all these centers are, Sears is barely hanging on, right? All of them. So the market sensed that ahead of time. Well, the market came up with a new prototype, and that was a lifestyle center which had all these stores without the anchors. And so part of the challenge that we have to grapple with is what kind of collection of independent stores function that still generates that kind of trip traffic that can then support the ancillary that may not be strong, especially independent.
So thinking about general merchandise, unfortunately it is one of the more difficult categories for Northglenn to tackle. Thinking about some of those larger stores, the Costco's, all of you live up here, you know that you're kind of surrounded in almost every direction by some of these larger format stores. And in addition, even looking out over the next 20 years, the trade area, the broader trade area around you may only support one or two additional of those types of larger stores. The market is fairly saturated at this point, given the household growth that we predict. One of the pros for Northglenn attracting that kind of thing is I-25 highway access and visibility, both I-25, 120th corridors like that. The cons, we just said, the market is really kind of saturated at this point for those specific kind of stores. So in terms of opportunities, we kind of went over these before, but seeking vitality and variety, and two of the ways, again, of doing that are looking at these convenience goods and those lifestyle and entertainment uses. We really think, just given our initial analysis, that Northglenn can really position itself to capture a little bit more of the area growth for those convenience goods. The pros of that, as we said, are the vitality in the area, the trip generation, bringing people into your other retail. The cons of that is that sometimes those convenience goods prefer the big box anchors that Andrew was just talking about. And so the challenge that we'll have to tackle is creating that critical mass, that other type of anchor, in lieu of having certain existing big box stores that can draw people.
In general, retail is a continuum. Both developers and consumers will gravitate towards that most efficient type of retail center and store where you can get the best deal, the best value. And then on the other end of the continuum is strictly lifestyle, where price is not a factor, it's all premium. And every center falls on the spectrum between these two. And what can Northglenn do, given the fact that some of the value is already established throughout the market, and that's northern part of Denver Metro, to move the centers for redevelopment closer along the continuum to lifestyle, where there's they're there, if you will, and there's a destination that people seek out independent of retail activity itself.
So just circling back again to those lifestyle and entertainment uses, one of the good things about those in terms of gaining and protecting retail sales is that those type of uses are generally a little bit safer from outflow and leakage. You have it in your community, people are going to come to it, and in fact, they probably are a little bit more successful in some cases at generating those inflow dollars. People want to come because, say in the rest of the North I-25 corridor, there aren't necessarily a lot of places right now that really have that sense of place, that people really want to go just because it's a great place to hang out. They maybe go because there's the Costco there. But is there another way to get people thinking that we want to go to Northglenn and do our shopping, spend our day, because they've created something unique in the area? So just a couple other points would be that idea we mentioned earlier of attracting a little bit wider range of households to support a wider range of retail types. And then just this thought of, there's a few initial sites that come to mind in our initial analysis, the marketplace and the 120th corridor, that are really primed for retail. There's certainly other sites within Northglenn that we're looking at as opportunity sites. They may or may not be right for the type of retail strategy that we're talking about. And so given what Andrew talked about earlier with industrial, multifamily, things like that, some of these other opportunity sites may be better used for other uses that can support the retail that you really focus on.
No, we're good.
You want to cover these?
Sure. So we just got 2 summary slides, and we'll make these quick because we want to get over to the exercise Jay's got going up here. But just snapshot: residential good, industrial strong, office and retail kind of mixed. We need to we're kind of on the bubble in these two. The good news, if you want to the next slide, is one of the things that we want to talk about is partnerships. If we have a market opportunity where we are on the bubble, developers that know that they can work with a municipality that's done partnerships in the past are going to be attracted to that. There's less risk, there's greater familiarity, and there's greater potential to carry off a deal and go vertical. So I think that is definitely puts Northglenn in a good light. Certainly mobility, high visibility, it's all good. Aging building inventory represents a challenge and an opportunity, if you will. And then shifting demographics is also interesting. We have an aging population as they start to turn their inventory. Who's coming in next? Is it going to be, and we can get into this in more detail later, but we're aware of this demographic shift and how do we position Northglenn so it can move in the direction that attracts the strongest resident in terms of investment in the civic community. Okay, that's one last thing. We added this slide at the very end. We don't need to go there, but I'll just mention it. All of the, we addressed the first question. We have a variety to address tonight, and we tried to summarize it in this slide that was in front of you. This wasn't in the packet. Interestingly enough, as we talk about these different uses, virtually everyone, I think all but one of the respondents last time put down mixed use as one of the desired outcomes of the study. So that is, with that as a segue in terms of the images that you prepared, and then some of what we're trying to report the conversation, we'll just use that as a segue.
Yeah. So I'll ask EPS and these guys to help out as well. But basically, after our last conversation with you all, we had I think we felt that was probably the most fruitful part of the meeting was when we actually had a conversation with you rather than just talking to you. So we're hoping to do some more of that this evening. So I'll ask Andrew, Chris, and Michelle to chime in as well. But we have some images that we can kind of sprinkle in. We added a few more in based on some of the feedback that we got in terms of the mixed use. There seemed to be an appetite for some higher density development. Also thinking about how do we use the investment in perhaps non-residential areas of our community to help complete the neighborhoods. How do we make them more walkable, create amenities as part of the dialogue that we had during our last conversation. So we can jump to the list of questions. I think we can start there. As Andrew said, a lot of people have indicated that mixed use was one of the desired things that you'd like to see moving forward. So when you, thinking back to last meeting, when you wrote down mixed use, we could have a couple of people share what they were thinking about as far as that mix of uses. What is it, retail and residential? Is it office and retail? So you want to share first?
I think it's everything but maybe industrial and mixed in. I just don't see the industrial piece fitting, but residential, places to eat, offices, everything where people can live and work and everything else.
And do you think there's examples of that now in Northglenn?
Well, not in Northglenn,
No. So what are some good examples that you do know?
no. Well, is it Bradbury?
Right.
Bradburn, sorry, Bradburn is one.
Okay.
In Arvada, there's the 5 Parks point. I think they do a really good job of it.
What was it called?
5 Parks.
5 Parks.
5 Parks. Yeah, the one thing, if I could chime in on 5 Parks, that's very interesting, is that it's in Arvada, and it's right in the heart of virtually all single-family homes, and for miles and miles. And a developer went out on a limb and created the town center. It's vertically integrated mixed use. First floor is commercial, second floor is condominiums, residential condominiums. I think there's some buildings are 2-3 stories. And there's a big aquatic center, community swimming pool area, and all of that is right next door. Vibrant, the restaurants are doing well, and it's a success. And it's also nice because they succeeded in an area that is fairly conventional in terms of the density around it. So it shows that it can be done.
I think something that I want to be conscious of too is that not to turn some of these projects into rental communities. Having homeowners or owners in there is important, I think.
So that's not, I mean, it's okay if it's a mix?
I think it's okay if it's a
Well, it's
mix,
not
but I think,
entirely
yeah,
rental.
it's not entirely rental.
Okay. And question for you guys, some of the newer development that is coming online, the projects that are finishing up, does it tend to be rentals right now?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Kim, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, right now, the market, they are essentially not making owner-occupied multifamily at this time because of the laws that are in place. It's too expensive with construction defects going on. So right now, everything is rental, unless it's the high dollar properties and the high ownership, 400,000, 500, 600 million for multifamily. Because it's just not cost effective and developers refuse to build anything that's not doing that. That could change this year because there are a couple of construction defects laws that working on through their way as a legislature. But with this mixed legislature and seeing some of the things they've already done this year, that's been a battle for a couple of years now. So hopefully it'll go through, but then again it may not. So, but right now it's just everything is rental. just because they can't afford to make the owner occupied, and it's a huge concern all across the state, but especially here in the metro areas where it's already expensive to build.
So, just building on what you've said, Mayor Murphy of Lakewood has led the charge, really, if you will, in tracking that. And I don't know if there's an opportunity for you as the mayor of Northglenn to be able to weigh in the fray, but.
Well, I do know that Lakewood is now at this point put in an ordinance to support the, that particular legislation, because the legislation, who knows if it's going to pass or not, so they have to move forward with that.
And that is something that we should track, just in the, it's kind of independent of this process itself, but Lakewood will get tested, and can Oklahoma City create laws that create safety and reduce risk, independent of what's going on with the larger state. Let's let them be the guinea pig, but let's see what is going to happen, and it might be a way to help solve that problem.
And I'll just add that on staff level, we are tracking, I think it's Senate Bill 177, I think it is, and we are, and I, as a staff, we're definitely aware of the importance of this, because as Kim was alluding to, the price point for which is the market for us is just below the threshold in which the developers are willing to entertain owner-occupied multifamily. So I think that it's one of the things that we struggle with, and we've seen that with the Billions project. We have someone coming on board who's looking at doing a project there, and we'll see if that comes to fruition. But I think we've had 3 or 4 false starts, and largely in part, I think this is a contributing factor.
You know, I was at an HBA, the Home Builder Association meeting, that was about a week ago, and their comment from all the builders was that we're not building multifamily. And their comment was that it's not if we get sued, it's just when we get sued.
Right.
And so right now, they act like there wasn't a direction. But let me throw this out. If you have
They're avoiding multifamily altogether, or just for sale or ownership?
the multifamily.
Multifamily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is understandable. So if you had an existing, say, apartment complex that you had right now, and you have an owner that wants to work with you, and they're using up a huge acreage area, if you went to more vertical apartments, is that a feasible type of way to go? And that opens up more square footage for retail in the same square footage area.
So what you're talking about is a higher utilization of the land, right?
Correct.
And it just, when you think about it, as cities, the core areas of cities develop over time, the market seeks for greater and greater utilization. And I think Northglenn is knocking on the door of that. So to be able to do that and to increase whatever uses are on that site, because when you have, I mean, we get pretty excited about this industrial vacancy rate because it's amazing. But when you get vacancies rates as low as that, the market's looking for another solution. And I mean, that's just, you know, we need to think about all the different uses, all the different parts of the city. But specifically on residential, it's there too. I mean, the rents are there. So I don't think that, you know, we can talk about this, we can look with, start to engage some of our property owners later on in the process and find out. But, you know, given where we are on the market dynamics, I think the market's ready to
So
go.
especially if you have a landlord that's willing to work with someone to do that, knowing that as you're going, rents in an older building are not going as much as a newer building are. The way the distance of the square footage rents are going up and up. So if you had somebody willing to work with that, and if someone applies, is that an urban renewal being residential since you're putting commercial in there too, or not?
Can it be a URA?
Yes.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it can definitely, I mean, the increments vary based on whether it's commercial or residential based on assessment rates, but it's, Debbie, you want to weigh in on this?
No, absolutely. You can have residential in your ATCs.
And so a landlord can apply for that and only have one finding of light on a study for that to be acceptable?
According to Corey, though, there's other restrictions that happen rather than with the commercial. So there's a lot more
I get that.
complications that go along with it. Yeah.
Right, I get it.
Something that I wanted to bring up that I think's been brought up before is you look at some other communities like Arvada and Louisville, and they have this downtown feel, this small downtown feel to it. They have that main street, you know, and Northglenn doesn't have that. And so on here you say Webster Lake demonstrates a pent-up demand. And so I'm wondering if there's a way, we're obviously looking at a new government center on this property, and implementing, you know, certain things in this development that attracts people that are over at Webster Lake, you know, i.e. maybe a skating rink, you know, something like that we incorporate here to kind of create that downtown feel where people are coming and, you know, what comes to mind is like the promenade over in Westminster. You know, they have a lot of things to do there, you know, entertainment, food, everything. So maybe you can create that feeling here, I'm not sure.
We're all about layering uses. I mean, how do you layer civic uses in with entertainment uses and with some recreation uses if you can, and with all these other uses? And, you know, it's got to be, we want to look at the slides, you know, it's got to be done in a way that still conveys a quality environment, quality space. But absolutely, that whole notion of co-location within one site.
Yeah, the mixing of uses, it does a lot of different things. In addition to sort of taking advantage of some of the market conditions, it also helps to activate space. I think we talked about that a little bit last time, but rather, you know, if you have a strictly residential neighborhood, it tends to be busy right away in the morning and the evenings. If you have an office park, it's busy from 8 to 5 or 8 to 6. And so that mix of uses helps to activate. And it also can help with sharing of different amenities. Probably the most important of which, from a cost perspective, these guys speak more to it, but parking. So if we can have a mix of uses where we can actually leverage the limited space that we do have and look at shared parking solutions, we can leverage the resources that we have much more fully.
Kyle, a good example of what you're describing is the Lakewood Civic Campus, because it backs up against the King Soopers Center across the street from Belmont. That's something that's the key.
Next question.
And maybe if you could just put on there that kind of small town, downtown feel, you know, is something to strive for, even if it's in a separate development. You know?
Yeah, is there if you have this, obviously here is the Civic Center, but is there you just say what's the center of town in the heart of Northglenn? Does something come to mind right now? Or where would you?
Yeah, Webster
Right
Lake, I
here.
think, is
Where's the closest? And do you think it does a nice job of it, or do you think we should?
We got two different Webster Lakes though. Let's make sure.
One in the park.
Okay, the park. So the lake itself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think with that said, I think you can create that within a separate development. What comes to mind is eventually when we develop Carl's Farm. I think you can create that feeling just within probably that development eventually, you know, in a community within a community like we've talked about before. And so it's not necessarily that you have to create that here, but in future developments, if it's the marketplace, if we redevelop the marketplace down the road, trying to maybe incorporate that into it, you know, that main street or that downtown feel, I guess.
Are there head nods along that idea?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, definitely. Okay, one shake.
Yep. Yep.
Mostly head nods, but not unanimous, right? Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Just the way that Northglenn is laid out, it's really hard to say that we're going to have a downtown. I think the Webster Lake and this area is our center. But, you know, if you're looking at traditional downtown, it's just really hard to picture that because we're so bisected by all of our arterial streets and the highway. I mean, we just don't have those vehicles with our corridors with the way that they're currently set up. I think it would take a lot of redefining the city, relaying out the city with its streets, with its residential. It would just take a lot because all of our corridors, our main corridors, are in residential areas. Huron, 100, Washington, those are north-south routes, and it's residential on either side of the very little commercial or anything. And then we have 104th and 120th. I mean, it's really hard the way that we're laid out. It would be great that we could go to DCI and say, hey, come out and do a study with us and let us know where we can put our downtown. But it's just not real feasible that we have a street that we can consider our downtown.
So sure.
Placemaking in different places, I think is completely different than creating a downtown.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's kind of where
we
you
don't
were.
need.
The whole notion of placemaking in different places.
So to have a center might not be feasible, but to create smaller nodes and activity centers, it's kind of that Main Street.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to go back to Bradburn, I mean, I think Bradburn's done a perfect job of creating that, you know, right when you enter their community, they have their restaurants and some businesses and everything, and then kind of, you know, that's kind of their main street, and then around that is their community, you know, and so, not necessarily, you know, I agree with Kim, it's difficult to create a downtown for Northglenn, but within these communities, in a community, you know.
It's a community within a community.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So there's something we've got a lot of consensus about.
Right.
So we said, maybe we can't achieve a downtown, but we did say we do have some amenities. Right now, Webster Lake is kind of the part of the community for some. What are some other amenities we can build upon? Or do you
Jay, if you want to just capture this, I think Kyle, you said community within a community.
Yeah, I was in agreement with that.
I think that's a pretty compelling phrase that we may want to revisit over the course of the project.
I think another area that we could maybe create a downtown, and I mean, this, obviously, these are all pipe dreams, they did a lot of work, but I'm thinking the TOD area, where the fast track stations, maybe where both stations are going, I'm thinking more 112th, but since the other one's gonna lie more in Thornton than Northglenn, but Northglen's right there.
And Carlos is right in the
Yeah, I mean, Carl's Farm is within the quarter-mile radius,
Mhm.
and it's almost entirely in the half-mile radius, so it isn't relevant.
Right.
Someone had a phrase for fast tracks, they called it the corridor of opportunity.
I think the marketplace is also
It is.
offers opportunities to create some sort of sense of community.
Yeah, I think it's prime for that mixed-use development that we've been talking about.
There's a lot of open space in that.
A lot.
A lot of caves, exactly. Purple, but there's a whole lot. When we see the marketplace, we see very low intensity.
With all the multifamily that's already surrounding that, what are the chances of doing mixed use over there with rental units or commercial units, with housing as part of that mixed use?
I think it's a great question. What are the odds of actually doing mixed use redevelopment? That's right. We've got some market parameters. We've got some financial feasibility. Are there revenues? Is the revenue stream in the future going to be large enough to offset all the various costs of doing redevelopment? At this point in the process, I'd say it's all doable. Ownership is going to be a key factor in working with the current landowners, because it's also more than just the owners of the marketplace itself, but it's the owners around it. So that would be my caveat on that specific question, is engaging the landowners in a way that they want to come to the table.
And are you talking about the bigger than just the marketplace and all the way like to Huron? Because like I said, there's a ton of multifamily there already. And
You
so
know-
that would be my concern, having a mixed use residential component, you know, do mixed use other uses of that residential, but having additional residential units that close is already so saturated with rental units. I see that as a big challenge. And I don't know, it may not be if we expand it and maybe say, take some of that multifamily that's already there and
And do what there?
level it.
Level the multifamily that's there.
Yeah.
All right, now that's visionary.
It's not, some of it's not in great shape, so,
All right.
but I mean, we have to think, I think that there's so much there already that I have a hard time at this point seeing additional residential in the marketplace.
I think, and especially right now, given the fact that we're still early in the process, I think some of what you're describing is absolutely on the radar screen for what the consultant teams should be tasked to figure out. One other detail that I'm very interested in is Huron for daytime population. What's going on with Digital Globe? And who wants to get on the interstate at lunch? Who wants to shoot down Huron? What kind of opportunities does Northglenn have to take advantage of all these wallets that are going to be moving to that location on Huron Point and in Bolts?
Right now, it means getting rid of residential.
Or some kind of mix. I mean, perhaps we rethink it in a way that generates more residential and more commercial with more vitality and more activity on every level.
Before you get to the point where the lifestyle goes to hell, in exchange for more retail.
Yes.
We have to live here too, and the traffic, in my neighborhood is obscene, it's crazy. So, if we jump on that, we're, 36,000 people, 6 square miles. I don't know if that just go up, bring it more and more up, years a day.
So a couple things. One, Michelle, if you can flip back to some images on some of the mixed use. I think there's some quality issues in terms of, we don't want to overdo it without a notion of a place. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we don't want to just increase activity just for that sake alone. You had a question?
Well, we do have this asset of the city property that we have, this facility, our PD, our rec center, all that. And maybe we should be thinking of multi-use there, of stacking different things on top of one another. Maybe the rec center, maybe our city, our city hall, other facilities, and possibly even some retail or even restaurants in there. So, I mean, I believe that this is quite an asset that could be at least considered as something we could do a mixed use with.
That's great.
Building
That's
up,
great.
as long as we don't compete with,
Yeah.
noise levels and things like that,
I have a quick question, just on going back to the marketplace. In your guys' experience, does that have potential to be this lifestyle center that you were talking about? Or is that type of place, are you going to need to keep big box stores there because of the access to I-25? Or
I think it's some retrofitting. When we first looked, it's basically on our initial site visit. We haven't done more analysis since yet. We want to have these types of conversations and see if there's something to explore. But I think our initial thought is, yes, it can have elements of the lifestyle center. I don't know, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in the middle of this, and it's reasonably well occupied, right? I mean, we've got one mid-box and some ancillary, but when you walk it, we walk the perimeter and go door after door after door, most of it is occupied. But you're standing there, you just feel like it's there. So what's going on? And the distance, the form, the design, the utilization of the land, it's all from a prior era. And rethinking that in terms of how you get more use out of land. I mean, I don't think we know right now, too early to tell, but I think we know that it is a lot of interest to see what's there. I can just tell you quite a bit to contribute right now.
She's going to talk vacancies.
Vacancies, well, I don't think the marketplace is at full, but I think for me, one of the things that appeals to me for having a mixed use and to bringing in some newer residents is I just think about the generations that are up and coming and what their interests are going to be. And so I kind of always say that we have an attrition that's about to happen in the next 10 years in our city, and we either create residents that people that are younger generations who don't want the upkeep of yard work and they don't want older homes, they don't appreciate those homes. We don't have anything that appeals to them. So here they are again gonna bypass our city and head farther north or east or west. And so again, we're not creating anything that brings in other residents. And we keep thinking, and I feel like we just get stuck on talking about this 5-year and what about 10 years where we're like in the development side of things and we just aren't going to appeal to those residents. So if we bypass not talking about mixed use and newer homes or condos or whatever it is, I feel like we just sent the opportunity farther. And I don't want to miss that.
And part of what you're talking about is that there is a window of opportunity coming up where there's going to be a lot of turn.
I'm trying to say that nicely.
Yeah.
The next generation.
And who comes in, and how do we accommodate needs across that spectrum, particularly given how much change is knocking on the door.
Right.
I think to piggyback off of Marcy, so I think that it's not necessarily even new builds. I think it's making our current houses more attractive. you know, and.
I think it's hard, we've tried on that
Yeah, I know,
sometimes,
so I
I
don't-
don't know
I
what
mean,
the answer is, but.
I don't know the answer either.
We have great lot sizes, but again, some of the younger generations, they don't want to have maintenance and they don't want that. But what I don't want to have happen, and I've said this numerous times, is I just don't want to have the senior attrition in our neighborhoods and then suddenly we become rental community of Colorado. And I really want to avoid that. And if we don't upgrade our houses and we don't look at that, that's what we're going to become.
We did a focus group of millennials recently for the Irvine Company.
For the what company?
For the Irvine Company in California. So the Irvine, California, largest financial planning community in the world.
Yeah, probably.
In the world. So, but they have a formula, you know, single family homes, and they're trying to reposition themselves, both their existing stock as well as their new product to appeal to millennials. And what they're finding is that millennials, yes, they don't want a yard, they don't want a mortgage necessarily initially, but millennials, like everybody else, get older.
Mm-hmm.
And so as they start families, as they have kids, which they do want to do, as they want to become part of a community and invest in that, they are seeking out single family home opportunities. I don't know any cohort that's really, or any place necessarily, that's successfully capturing the families, the kids in a sort of a downtown, sort of multifamily environment. So I think yes, you're capturing them in the front end potentially, but you know, good price points, good product that's coming in line with multifamily. But I think you're onto something, repositioning that single family housing stock so that it is the next wave coming in, and I think you can take advantage of it. But it's about amenities. That's what our research and all the interviews
So
are
I agree.
included. It comes down to amenities.
And Marcy, let me just also jump in. I think the other part of our approach with planning projects we have undertaken right now, one's the zoning code rewrite, and that's something where we're actually going to look at how can we re-engage the neighborhoods and existing housing to create opportunity potentially, if that's the feedback that we get, to sort of understand, is there a way that we can reactivate some of the neighborhoods through zoning? And I think more importantly is what we heard earlier, is that developers have consistency and reliability and know what the expectations are of the community. The zoning code is one of the key cornerstones to that. And that's part why this is sort of a hand-in-glove type of an exercise.
So the question is, what are the amenities that millennials look for when they move either within a region or to a region? You know, we talk about this all the time because they're a little bit of an enigma,
If I can speak,
We have a live one.
Fortunately, EPS has a spokesman.
Yeah, I think it actually has to do a lot with what you mentioned in the prior presentation, is we want, our people want mixed use, high density, walkability, access to things within a walking distance, so doctors, groceries, things like that, and then access to transit to get to work and to our friends and things. So.
One of my impressions too is that in addition to amenities, the term I often hear associated with millennials is experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I think would lend itself to Northglenn sort of repositioning its single family stock would be that a lot of these millennials grew up in the huge suburban McMansions, and in a way maybe the last thing they want to end up in. So they may get older, they may need more room than an apartment can provide, they may want a small yard for a couple kids. But I think my impression is a lot of millennials have expressed that they would rather spend their money on experiences and not having a huge house that requires tons of time and money to maintain. So a great simple house in a great community with good schools may be just the thing that attracts these millennials 5 or 7 years on when they do start thinking about things. And Northglenn could be really well
Did you
positioned.
hear the term of authenticity a lot? So
How long
experiences
does
and all.
millennials stay in a job? About 5 years?
I don't know, we'll have to see, because.
We've had her for 6 months.
Michelle's been with us for what?
I think that.
You like it already, right?
But as we are getting into our 30s and 40s or so, I think that we'll be going in the same patterns as before with a little bit of just keeping up with the times. We do want stability in families and long-term jobs and things like that.
I just wanted a better job.
What could be a better place? Just to echo some of these other comments, one phrase that I heard when I read this study once that just sums it up, I think, is someone saying, my apartment is where I sleep, my neighborhood is where I live. So that, and I think that it's very interesting when you think about it in terms of Northglenn. I think we've got a couple different cohorts. One is we need to talk about. One is that single kind of looking for a very vibrant place, and the other is the people knocking on the door of that next step, where it is wanting to raise a family, wanting to move into that kind of the next step of life. And I'm very fascinated with how to help the next generation thrive. And something that should keep us all up at night are the flat wage level increases that have been reported for a decade plus. And there's this major bifurcation going on between the housing economics. But I mean, that's this huge national challenge. In terms of what it means locally, is what's the market position for Northglenn relative to this backdrop? And I think, particularly with charter schools, we heard a lot about charter schools during the and how, when you think about it in terms of inflow, outflow, if you will, there's a lot of people coming to Northglenn for education. And what does the city do? And granted, city schools are 2 or 3 universities, right? But what might the city do to be able to reinforce all of that and strengthen the families that are trying to recreate what they might have had in the previous generation, but can't? The price points are all different, the incomes are different, the wages are different, and there might be a great opportunity. Yes.
One other area that I would love to see something happen, and Brooke, I know we've talked before about zoning, but it's the other area on the other side of the park, the apartments and the townhomes where we have high crime rate. Yes? High crime rate. So to me, it seems really obvious to start trying through attrition or, private development. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it seems like that's the area. You're surrounding the lake on the other side, you're near the amenities of the promenade. Maybe you're redoing the Albertson Shopping Center also. You're creating that whole synergy all surrounding this area.
Well, and to link what you're saying now with what was said earlier, Webster Lake and the park around the lake being one of the assets, one of the most important assets in the city. How do we reinforce that with the land uses right around it? And specifically addressing some of the pockets where there's high crime and things like that.
I think you'll probably see that's probably an area that's identified.
And for me, with the zoning, because I'm very interested in the original development, some of those lots, you could put 2 or 3 homes, on those lots. And so I think with zoning, we have to take a look at that and see, when the attrition happens in those neighborhoods, if we take a look at that and able to utilize those lots. Yeah, well, whatever it might be, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to be cognizant of time. We're a few minutes past the hour. Are there any key things here that people gave thought to that they want to talk about before we wrap up, or do you have any specific areas that you want to?
No, I think we hit on some of these market force factors, thinking about millennials, the turnover that we're going to have in our single-family neighborhoods. What are people looking for? Are there other market forces that you want us to consider that you've been pondering yourself as far as a potential demographic to target a certain feature? Yeah.
What comes after the millennials? What we're talking about here, we're not going to be getting done in the next 2 years. If this is 10 years out, some of these plans are 10, 20 years out by then, it's going to be the next, whatever popular word is at the time, to describe a group of people. So what comes after that? Because that's what we really need to be planning for, not just the millennials, which are the ones that are the big topic now. We have to be looking even more forward than that, because if we only look at them, by the time we get anything in place, we're gonna have passed them up. So I think that we need to be looking hopefully at some shorter range things that we can do to, in the near future and the longer
Phase
range
in.
future.
I think you're only gonna see that increase even more. I think your younger generations are gonna be, pardon me, even more lazy and not more active and, I mean, I think we're doing it. I mean, they're technology, they're not into.
The one thing I would add to amplify this conversation is you're talking about the demand. Also think about it in terms of the supply. Like as 10, 20 years down the road, what's Northglenn's market position relative to even the further out locations where the options will be at that point in time? And Northglenn's in a great geographic position.
So I think one thing we have to have on there, and Kim can hopefully chime in on this one a little bit, and maybe Marcy, but a private company that, look, I know you're giggling already, huh? A private company that is it acquires residential properties and blocks things together, type of thing. We had one at one time, and of course, maybe it wasn't the greatest idea at the time and everything like that, but maybe it's something we need to relook at. We called it NNDC, but maybe it's something we have to relook at again.
So it aggregates land.
Wayne, the reason I laugh is because it's politics. That's what killed it.
Those were called communes, weren't they?
Yeah.
That's what killed us.
I was in one of those.
A previous cohort. Well, as
what the original thing was, it was Northglenn Neighborhood Development Corporation, and they had the airport mitigation money. They redistributed throughout Northglenn for airport noise, from insulation to doors to windows, that type of thing. And that kind of semi-funded, the city funded it a little bit, and then from there they worked on like the original house in Northglenn. Made added on a great room and a garage that didn't have things that made it more modern of a house, skylight, sky tube type of thing, and a couple of them they popped the roof, or one of them they popped the roof off and made it a story, and it wasn't feasible. It was a money loser at that time, and maybe probably still will be, but somewhere down the road, as property becomes more valuable along I-25, you're going to have to look at doing that, and I don't know if this is the correct time to do that, but. It's something that should be on the list at least.
Well, I think it's a fascinating idea, and especially the idea of an arm that would actually acquire land. I mean, if you can acquire land, you're in the driver's seat. So you have a lot of options.
And what I'm thinking about, my first thing I think about all the time is that somebody, as you got like fast tracks going in, and I'm thinking of the 112th and York one there, you have all these people that live on that side right there, and the only access is to walk all the way over to Irma, back down 112 together. You're not going to do that. So would somebody buy up a house or two in there and provide some kind of access to that bridge in there? I don't know. I mean, you're really getting extreme now, but I'm looking at Brooke right past you, because he's the one like.
Well, and to kind of tag on to that just a little bit, I was down at a meeting in Tennessee, and this particular city we were in, it was landlocked where we are. What they did was, though, the city purchased land outside of their city, and even though they had to pay taxes to other entities, they were in control of property all the way up, and they actually. Instead of flagpole annexing, they purchased land, and they had property all the way up. So it's just another idea,
It comes down to money. I mean, I guess that should be on there too. A question mark with a dollar sign. Is it doable? I mean, it's great to come up with ideas, but is it beneficial for the city, and are you going to make money at it, or down the road it's going to pay for itself?
Right, and another way to think about that is what's the price tag associated with different policy actions? Everything has a price tag.
Yep.
Just how big or small is it, and is it worth it or not? I mean, and we will definitely get into that. I mean, that's what we love to crunch. But at a minimum, we'll throw the idea out there in terms of land acquisition as a potential role.
And Wayne, you bring up a great segue to sort of wrap this up, because the other thing that we're going to discuss at the next meeting is the fiscal policy side of this in terms of the city's financial sustainability based off of where we are
Ideal.
today.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Jay, that is a piece of art.
It is.
I do this all the time. I'm sitting here amazed.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, one more thing where it says developments and other places you'd like that would work well in Northglenn. The only thing I wrote in there, and I have to throw it in one more time.
Is I
Ice
Ice cream.
Little
I
map.
support that.
Draw it. You have to draw a little map.
Show that ice cream, yes.
It's the milk jug. The milk jug.
We'll make sure, you might need to.
Yes, we were there last night.
I have a picture. You want me to send that over to you?
But I didn't take a picture, but I was there.
Oh, yeah.
And I support it 110%.
You really put the pressure on the
Okay.
So wrapping up, if there's additional input and feedback, please feel free to reach out and let us know, and we'll convey that over to EPS and team to keep this sort of dialogue going. If there's things that come up after tonight's meeting as well, because I think this is really a great feedback time, and I think it's very meaningful for us. So I just want to thank everybody today for participating.
Thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the draft corridor master plan. I guess it's Brooke again.
Yes,
Yep.
Brooke, good.
Actually, it's going to be Brooke very quickly, and then I'm going to hand it over to Travis and Mike Casper from DHM.
Okay.
I just want to kind of just give a brief recap on the history of how we got to here today. During last year's council retreat, we had identified as one of the things as a desire for citywide streetscape. And so through that conversation and follow-up meetings, we identified to revisit the 2010 draft corridor plan that never got adopted. And so through that, in June of last year, we had a council study session where we then reviewed the project approach and the scope and sought out council consensus. And then we engaged DHM, who was the original consultant that worked on the corridor plan, to help us come back and basically reorganize and reformat the draft corridor plan for the purposes of discussion. And then in November of last year, we sort of gave an update midway project of that, and we took some of your feedback as well. And so tonight, here we are with a final draft version. We want to get some more input from you and also answer any questions that you guys have. And Travis has a presentation, very brief one, and then we'll open it up to questions and conversation.
Okay.
Thank you, council members. Mayor Downing. As Brooke mentioned, we're looking at a draft that was circulated via your packet. And tonight we'd be looking for comments, discussion, edits regarding its preparation for adoption at a future meeting. I have with me Mike Gasper from DHM, the consulting firm that we worked with. We want to just talk about plan context a little bit here to start with, in terms of the staff seeing the use of this plan. It's essentially, we're outlining here that it's a comprehensive examination of all the corridors throughout the city, and looking at kind of an overview of the major items that are opportunities or major items that might need improvement. So it's kind of an overview looking at kind of the starting point for each of these corridors throughout the city as to what opportunities there are for improvement into the future. We're also highlighting that it's aspirational in its nature. We recognize it's a plan. Many of the solutions you see are an optimized conditions situation. Something to shoot for, if you will, when you start to take a look at one of these individual segments of a corridor and moving through the process to designing a future construction project. And also, we see it as being guidance for the capital improvement plan. So again, as I mentioned before, a starting point whereby capital improvement plan can take some of its, it can act as a playbook for the capital improvement plan moving forward as some of these projects are prioritized through the corridor master plan. The other slide that we prepared here tonight was more plan context in terms of where we see this plan being on the spectrum between planning for a project and then actually constructing that project. And if you see up on the slide here under the citywide corridor plan, we have this way out on the one end of the spectrum. These are the big ideas. These are the optimized corridors, what you might be shooting for in that aspirational plan about, in a sense, designing the best conditions for each of these roadways. As you move through that and you identify that you're looking to do a construction project on any one of these corridors, you're looking at more of a specific concept, and you start to narrow those things down at that point, and you start to look at these things, the corridor, in more detail, including cost estimates, what the feedback would be from the neighborhood and how that sits with them, let's say, as well as some of the more detailed, finer elements of the physical design of a corridor. And that's before you get to the design spectrum, where the engineers start to create blueprints about what we're actually going to build prior to construction. So we're way out here on the left-hand side in the big ideas arena with this, but it is providing guidance. It is providing guidance for roadway construction projects on the important corridors throughout the city moving forward. So with that, as we discussed in November, the plan is structured in a way where we examine the remaining priority projects for the arterial corridors throughout the city, the ones that haven't been completed between 2009 and now. Those are highlighted up here in pink, being Washington Street, South Huron Street, and portions of 120th, 104th, and northern portion of segment of Huron Street. In addition, the next section of the plan itself deals with what we're trying to call multimodal collectors. These are collectors and connectors throughout the community that are built to serve the local street network, collect traffic onto those collectors, and then connect people and important places throughout the community, be it schools, parks, areas of transit, and commercial centers. And those are all reflected up here. And then also in the plan, we're in a sense providing a finer bit of detail on a couple of priority projects, being Melody Drive as an area for significant opportunity as one of these multimodal collectors, as well as Community Center Drive, and we highlight some of those solutions in this plan. The third part, third section of the plan, we talk about future planning concepts. These are the even bigger ideas about actually where roadway networks deviate from the current situation, additional connections are made, but they're, again, these are ideas that are memorialized as if the project comes around at some point, there's redevelopment in the area, this is something we may want to consider. It's not something we're committing to doing necessarily because of you'll see the big bold blobs of mapping and bold arrows that just kind of talk about the concept of changing the network in some significant way. And then the fourth portion of it is a collection of the fencing information that we collected back in 2010, both in the public realm, because those are the actual brackets of these corridors and how they are defined at the edges. Public realm fencing, the stuff that the city creates and has put in place over time, but also some standards and design details about private realm fencing, so private landowners' fences that we might want to look at providing more context or more consistency to in future regulation updates. So that's just the basis as we outlined in the memo for the content of the plan, and we'd just like to talk about any editorial aspects of it, any updates, any comments that the council would have before we tee it up for adoption at some future meeting.
So I saw the fencing real quick on there, and there's some on Washington, similar ones on the other ones you're thinking. On the city pay for that then, and do the maintenance on those also? Roads that have the mix match of fences, every fence is a different kind of fence. Yeah, exactly, yeah. They're just, everything's different. Is that what you're thinking, that the city would put one uniform fence down those areas and then maintain it also?
We highlighted those areas where it's already, in a sense, started in some places on Washington, or it was a practice that occurred in the past.
Right.
And it would be some kind of uniform kind of unifying element to bracket those corridors with some type of consistent fencing along those lines. Right. Knowing full well that there's a significant issue with ongoing maintenance with fencing of that.
That's, I mean, first thing, hides backyards, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It does that. But do we have a current maintenance program on all the stuff that we installed before?
Yes.
We do, okay.
Yes. When I first came here, Parks and Rec has a 5 to 7 year maintenance cycle that they do on the existing fences, and when we did Village Greens, we incorporated that into their program.
Thank you.
So, yeah. And I would just add that what you're suggesting is one approach to do.
So you're suggesting that there are fences in the city that are on public property?
Not necessarily. I think what the question was is that would basically developing a comprehensive fence program down major arterials be one way to do this? And I think the answer is yes, we could look at it that way. The other ways is we could adopt a standard for properties along arterial corridors that when they replace their fences, they replace them to a certain standard when they deteriorate. I think there's a couple different ways to approach that.
That makes sense. I just don't know of any fences that are on public right-of-way that belong to us. We've repaired fences that were privately owned using CDBG money, that's for sure.
Yep.
But we don't have fences on city property, i.e. right-of-way.
Who would be the owner at 104th and like Washington, those fences there? Are they privately owned even though we put them up?
Yeah.
And we maintain them?
We maintain the right-of-way side of the fence.
Right.
And there's an easement that we were granted, I believe, in some of those situations.
Right. And that was CDBG money.
We've used regular funds and CDBG funds. So, the funds that we used for village greens was not CDBG.
Right. Correct.
The project, I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say it was 05 or 07 is when we did major corridor.
Okay.
And we have had requests from some of the residents, you know, when their fences, they knew they were going to have to replace them, that they actually came to us a couple of years ago and asked for some assistance. At that time, we didn't have anything to help them, you know, any kind of an ordinance or something.
Well, that's ideal if you have the guidelines
Right.
and someone wants to do something, say, this is
Right.
what our standard is, this is
Right.
what we want you to follow through with.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we're doing here is identifying that there's an opportunity here. And I think that as we move forward, one vehicle is the zoning code. We can look at addressing this in that way. And I think on another note, it's a future, discussion for the council if they so choose to take it up to consider as well.
Kyle, did I see your hand or?
Yeah, I just had a quick question on the bridge that's coming over Community Center Drive across I-25. What was the thought process on only having the sidewalk on one side of that bridge? Because I know that we've run into that issue down by the school, with the crosswalk, and now that's been taken out. And so to even get to that other side, you have to go all the way down here on, to get, have a sidewalk. And so I've always been curious about that, and I've found it kind of mind-boggling why you only have a sidewalk on one side to get across. So,
It largely predates me in the decision-making on that, or whatever physical constraints there were at the time. I don't know, only knowing that you have to deal with the northern side that has a sidewalk.
and so is that solvable, being that the bridge is already built? I mean, are we pretty much stuck with the sidewalk on one side of that bridge? Basically is what I'm curious about. Or could we or is there any plans to put a sidewalk on Community Center Drive? Do you see, does that make sense?
David?
I would say anything is solvable.
He's going to say that.
Yeah, and again, that would be easy as well. My guess is going to be progress very large thing on the sort of the south eastern side, I-25. So, again, the sidewalk is
And is there a concept, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a concept to actually have an off-ramp potentially at Community Center Drive down the road? No? Because I was looking at page 4, and it looks like to me that...
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like there
There,
might be.
we were working on the previous plan, which was 09, there was a discussion of that possibly happening or might happen. I don't know what the context of that discussion was. That's why it was included. That's why that shadow was on there, because it was suggested as a future ramp. But I'm not sure where the direction was coming from. If it was coming from CDOT or coming from a wish list that the city might have.
And I'd characterize it more as a wish list. This was happening in conjunction or in a parallel track with a comprehensive plan. And that was one of the elements that actually didn't get a lot of favor necessarily, as some kind of.
And to kind of add on to that, I was on council at that time, and it was cost constraints and also timing, because we had the money to build the bridge across, but if we wanted to put an on-off ramp on, we had to deal with CDOT and all the restrictions that go along with that, and there was a number of them. We might not have even been able to get a bridge or an on and off ramp because of some of the things that were going on. So that was what happened.
Just a general comment, this plan still has all the vegetation in it, in the right-of-ways. That's permanent maintenance for, you know, forever. And there's just far too much. I said it before, and it's still there. You know, there's along the sidewalks, down the medians, vegetation, you gotta maintain it. And it's, when you cover the entire city that way, you've got one to deal with.
I was thinking the exact same thing when before you said that, and it's nice to have trees, and that looks great, and it makes everything green and stuff. But the median ones are probably the overkill of how do you irrigate them, how do you weed them, how do you trim them? When branches grow easily into the roads and that type of thing. So to me, sometimes the median area is a little extreme, I think.
So perhaps with that feedback is maybe we could include some language in there that, you know, an emphasis on median design is limited to like a xeriscape or a hardscape type of treatment.
Low maintenance. Yeah.
Low maintenance. Type
Low maintenance, low water. You know.
And I think Gene, to your point is perhaps we add language that talks about the taking into account the ongoing maintenance costs of the infrastructure when we look at streetscape to make sure that it's not only reasonable but feasible.
Because the maintenance costs will cost more than the construction.
Right. So I think that's great feedback, and I think we can definitely look at it.
At the time when we did this initially, the median that was pointed to us at the time as an example is the one on Community Center Drive in terms of how that's been articulated. But no matter what median you do, there's that zone where you're going to get splashback, and maintenance is an uphill battle. So really understanding what environment you're dealing with and how to get that maintenance as low as possible is certainly something we should be considering.
Jumping over to Community Center Drive, talking about 4-lane in it. What happens to the turn lane?
So that's why this is aspirational. But more importantly is we're currently doing a traffic impact study for Community Center Drive, and we're going to get an answer to that. We've been meeting with the traffic consultant, and I believe end of next week is when we're going to see a draft of what the actual roadway template needs to be for future. But we'll be working on that as we move forward with the civic units.
We're still going to project 4 lanes and a turn lane in the middle, right?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
And I would just point to the graphic we've got up here. This plan talks about kind of aspirational or kind of a long-term future scenario. We're talking about considerations out here, and as we move into specific studies, we narrow that down, and there's fiscal constraints, et cetera.
And Gene, I will tell you that when we were talking about with the engineer about the future planning as far as future development impacts, we kind of were getting into this thing where the traffic engineer was saying, hold on a second, you're getting a little ahead of yourself. We don't want to create a circumstance where the only justification is a 4-lane template. We need to really take a closer look at the reality of the distribution of traffic. So they're very keenly aware of it as well. And we'll see what they come up with.
You also have in it still, you've modified it, but you're still blocking my traffic from my neighborhood south of 104th.
We want to keep you in the neighborhood.
Pardon?
We're keeping you in the neighborhood.
Well, our neighbors
right.
just can't get out. Right out only. That's not nice to do that to people. All those streets south of 104th on Huron, from now on, it's right out. Right out.
The reason when we looked at that, what page is that? one of the things we are doing is if you were to do this plan today and decide that that's going to be a major arterial, it is, you typically don't have as many individual residential streets accessing it that frequently. That's the way it is, that's the condition that it is today. And is it optimal? Maybe not. I think just like you're doing a traffic study to find out more information on Community Center Drive, I think at some point, if there were issues that needed to be investigated, you take that next step. You've got school traffic on that road. You've just got a lot of traffic movement going on there. Maybe it's not an issue now. Maybe it never will be. But the idea that we're putting forth is, if you were doing it today, best practices would be to not have that many individual residential streets that frequently. You might have every other one, and the planning on the interior would be done to accommodate that. We don't have that luxury. It is what it is. So we're just offering some suggestions on how you might address that. And again, as Travis said, it's aspirational. This isn't saying you're going to do it, but if traffic fatalities, hopefully not, incidents, more traffic, who knows, maybe the traffic on that street will reduce over time. We don't know. But at some point, there may be something that triggers a look at this, and you might come back to this plan and say, well, this is what we were looking at before. Does this make any sense? We need a traffic study to really delve into it.
Yeah, but the request is for council to adopt it as is. There's no way we could go for that. I mean, I like to have a river running down the middle of Huron Street, but it's not practical. So I'm not going to adopt a plan calling for that. And blocking off these streets, making them one way out or one way in, all along every other one. No way. It's not nice either.
How difficult would it be to change something if it was adopted down the road then?
Well, maybe part of the conversation here is understanding that part of the overall goal of this is that we understand that if in the future something comes up, and rather than just a future council saying, hey, I want to go do 120th, there's a rhyme and reason and a justification to support those the further next steps. And I think that the question here is that in this study, it's not saying that there's a traffic safety issue, that there's an accident history issue here. It's merely saying that if Huron Street is an arterial corridor and we need and traffic is becoming an issue, here are solutions to solve that problem. But I think the other thing is that the way that we've structured or attempted to structure this plan is to identify issues, not necessarily say that this is a straight action plan. The other part that we've talked about when we worked through the strategic goal setting part of this is to really identify a CIP programming after we adopt this. And then I can tell you right now, Community Center and 120th, we're already starting that process on those. So it's really more of a question of when we get into a specific corridor planning exercise, is better understanding whether any of this is necessary.
In 5 years from now, there's a great likelihood that neither you nor the members here will accept it as that. They'll look at the plan and say, well, this is what we have on the table. Meanwhile, the idea that you might be blocking those off is going to get out in the public, and the neighbors are going to know it, and the realtors are going to know it, and oh, you're now getting constricted access to your property. That really helps with regards to resales and maintenance. There's all sorts of scenarios that can come. If you put something out that you're not going to do, then don't put it in. That's my point. And when you really, after you beat me down and everything else, turn to page 42 and I'm going to win.
All right, why don't you, what does sound close to?
Mira is out the door.
Pardon me?
Mira is gone. Page 42. Just to start with. If you take a look at it, the big blue that's scheduled for a multifamily, and it has been in the old plan too, that's O'Meara. I guess there's that university down there by our pond in the south end. That's now going to be new commercial back there.
Does the digital sign stay?
No room for it. And we've got proposed commercial retail development. Well, we already have retail there with Best Buy and the other businesses in there.
I think this is a good example of how this really dovetails to the discussion you were just having.
Right.
About forward-looking and planning. This is not, and I think some of the confusion is, I get what you're saying about if it's adopted, everybody, and it gets out there, people think that this is the plan you're moving forward with, and it's a done deal. And that's not really the intent of this. But I understand what you're getting at in terms of the getting out and not having the benefit of a discussion to explain it. But this plan really is dovetailing with what the previous discussion was about in terms of forward-looking land use within the city of Fort. And that's really all it is.
Well, I'll go over to Mirror tomorrow with this plan and say the council's going to adopt it, but don't worry. That's not gonna fly.
Kyle, did you have something? Wayne? Okay.
No, but I agree with Gene on this. I mean, that, I hate to have it so nailed down or what, and I get it's just a plan and this is the direction we're going, but maybe just have standards in that if we come across them, this is what it's going to be, but this isn't actually what's going to happen here and here and this kind of thing, actually in the plan, so that 5 years from now, people saying, well, it's in the plan, we have to do this. If you're going to develop this property or redevelop this property, this is what's going to happen. It says right here, single-family homes.
We'll forget about it, and the staff will say, by the way, this is the plan that the council adopted several years ago, therefore, we're just pursuing it.
I guess the question I have is, I mean, to me, I just don't know how this would even be possible. You're basically saying they kick O'Mara off?
That's what this plan proposes. See the big blue area?
No, I see the big blue area.
O'Mara's there now, scheduled for multifamily. That's what this plan suggests.
Carol?
I guess I'm just going to add into this discussion now because I really beg to differ with 112th, and I've said this before, and I don't care what Dr. Cobb says, that through 2035, I mean, you're saying 2 lanes is reasonable through the planning horizon of 2035, and I just so beg to differ with that. I think that it's not in the radar of this plan to increase that to 4 lanes is ridiculous. And then to add the idea of the Malley extension that will meet at 112th Avenue in Washington, thinking you're not bringing more traffic into 112th when it's still not 4 lanes. I mean, yeah, I just don't get that one at all. I see where you're coming from, but I just really think that the traffic figures that you're getting back they're just wrong. They're wrong on 112th Avenue. I think we're way behind the 8 ball on that one.
To dovetail on that, I've talked to Thornton, and I know they're doing 4 lanes over there. So why would we have 3 and they're having 4 lanes?
It's actually when we went through this planning process with Matrix, we looked at this very closely, and when we went and started doing the actual engineering design, we went back to Thornton, and you are correct. Thornton at some point is going to build a 4-lane template. However, where they've identified the need for the 4-lane template is going east to Colorado, because they're assuming that the travel demand is going to go east, not west, because 112 doesn't get you to the highway corridor and to where they modeled their traffic. So when we looked at whether to do the 4-lane versus the 3-lane, that was based largely on what Thornton's transportation plan had identified at the time. Is that the split of traffic that was going to warrant the 4-lane in Thornton didn't have an assignment of enough vehicles going east to warrant a 4-lane roadway. David, am I getting that correct?
Where are they going to start their 4-lane road?
East of York.
East of York.
Yeah, but that's
where we end.
That's right.
Why wouldn't we?
Why? So it's going from 3 to. That doesn't make sense.
But our traffic's going to flow all the way. If you get a configuration getting Malley onto 112, now you're bringing 112 traffic all the way from 36, where they're going to connect 112 all the way through. From over in Westminster and Broomfield, all the way through. All the way out to Brighton.
It's true.
People use it. I mean, they avoid 104th and 120th to take 112. And I know that will change because patterns will change, and we'll put more stoplights in on 112 because I get that, but I just think it's being I don't know, you're just not thinking forward on
We'll make it easier for traffic to get through town.
Yeah.
That's the big advantage, the only advantage.
For 4-lane.
Help people to get through our city.
Don't you want to bring people from the other side of the highway over to the new TOD spot? I mean, on 112, so.
When we looked at, and I wasn't involved, I only came in at the tail end of the 112th project, but I can tell you when this project was started, we looked to answer all of those questions, and the answer came back is that you didn't need a 4-lane template from Washington to York. You only needed a 3-lane template, and that was looking 20 years out plus in order to do that.
I know, because their numbers said 14,000 people a day up to like 16,000. It wasn't a very big increase over the next 15 years.
That's right.
It was extremely, which I thought, to me, doesn't make sense. But, really, in the middle of the day, it's not that overused of road. But at 8 o'clock in the morning at Irma, you sit through the light at least 3 times, well, at least 2 times, probably 3 or 4 times. You sit through the light to get through there, and it's got a lot of volume going through. But the advantage, I think that Gene was trying to lean to, maybe you want to slow people down in your town a little bit. And, I don't mind, my shop's right there, I don't mind people parking in front of my shop and looking at me all the time. Not that they come in, but they know you're there, that's for sure.
We should improve the level of service, especially at home there, because the turn lane, the lights that we put in a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, are set up for a turn lane there, but it's not in there. So when the road construction starts, when we come in council on Monday night to award that contract, you're gonna have a long queuing there for 4 turns when we go down the road and the road. By the same token, you're gonna have a through lane in the south going east.
That should improve that.
Should improve the level of service.
Right.
And I just want to basically reiterate what I said, our police don't have a small place here, that because the 112 teams at Washington, it just doesn't incur the level of volume and important things that they're going to have, even when these problems. I wouldn't say that, I don't think their model is actually right.
You mean Thornton?
I was going to ask which model.
And I do know that Thornton regularly monitors their traffic lanes over there. I mean, the thing is that when you add an extra lane, you're doubling the capacity of the traffic.
When we have full towers, we have a rotation model all of our roadway system. Cat tracks, all that stuff on our program, and we can supply to any models. We compare that to the bottom model. At the end of the day, though, I believe the roadway is going to be adequate enough. Just so council knows, if in fact you ever did want to go for right now, it would cost, this part is going to be a $5.3 million project, if not all that time, all said and done. It would be twice that if I had to put it in 4 lanes.
I understand that, but you're talking about putting 4 lanes on Community Center Drive, so.
Well, no.
Well, you guys threw it out there, so.
I think.
Where do you spend the money, I guess, when it's gonna come down to that? I don't know. You're down to TOD there, and I'm glad that Thornton's only thinking that traffic is gonna go that way, east to Thornton, but I think traffic is coming in from the west also to utilize that TOD, so.
I can see where what you're talking about, the turn lanes improves it, because if you had 1 lane and they kept moving, you'd do great. The problem is we have 1 lane and 1 light to go straight, and that's the problem. And you can't make a left there because you're backed up 80 cars back to make a left down there, or a right even, because you're backed up in 1 lane. So what do people do? That center lane fills up with, so it's a 2-laner right now anyway. It's just not legal. People are cutting over the yellow line to get in that second line. From the tracks, people just jump over and start going. If you're over there like at 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning, that's what it does. But people do go to Washington and then turn up to Malley and then, go up Washington, Malley, and then over that way. So it's still a leapfrog going westbound. And then you see the same thing where people are getting in line, waiting to make a left on Malley, and the ones that are impatient cut through the back of the thrift store. And they got the big speed bumps now, but you still have a line of cars that are going over the speed bumps and cutting over to Grant and up that way. So traffic's still moving through there.
In a lot of places in Northglenn that have developed, the roadway network is so constrained, where the cost to acquire a property would be so significant. Just going back to these Grand Community Center Drive example, what I could foresee could happen. Going southbound for Grand, I could see maybe 4 lanes there for the community center and the city center master plan to take care of the retail center, move have to work with being a controlling factor on how we can develop the property. This is a classic case of the Center Drive, and so is the East Center as well.
And I think, Carol, you bring up a really good point, is that this plan is really identifying that a 4-lane roadway may be necessary for a community center development. And what we're doing now is testing that. Okay, but because the plan says it, doesn't mean that it's going to actually happen. And I think that's really a key distinction here, especially when we get into this planning concepts part, because that's what these are. They're concepts. They're not a call to action to go build this. They're a call to say, in the future, to look at this and further study it to see if it's actually warranted or not. And from what I hear is that really, let me clarify. I think that what may be missing from this language is that context, where this is not a mandate to go build this. It's more of a question to say, is it worth further study? And I understand the concerns that are brought up. And I only point out that if you guys want to take them out, that's fine. But first, I just want to make clear that this is not an action plan to go build this stuff. It's a identification of areas for further study and consideration.
It's a roadway network scenario that supports the land uses that's shown in the plan. It doesn't mean it's a situation. If the land use doesn't develop, become reality, then the roadway network isn't shown. It's a scenario that doesn't work.
I would vote to actually take out the whole narrow turning into multi-family residential. I can't see that coming to fruition ever, so I'm not sure what the point of that being in there personally.
But it is, if we scaled it back to redevelopment, let's say, on some level, it is in the Urban Renewal Authority as well. So, we've already considered that that's the potential into the future.
Of redeveloping O'Mara?
On the south side of 104th.
And it's not just the O'Mara property, it's also
All the
bowling
others.
alley,
Yeah.
the gas station, and everything that's in that area. It's more of a grouping of that area. It's not an individual parcel.
That's really why a lot of these parcels were included, because they were identified as a renewal area. It may be a softer definition of what that would be, might be an approach to.
Why is taking Bannock and pushing it through to the 100th place so important? I know it's a back door to get into your new retail, but it's also taking out 2 widows' homes, 2 of them, and it's putting traffic right pointed up beside the high school and increasing the volume there during different times of the day is very questionable.
Part of some of those technical items, that's building connection to Melody Drive. It's a highly underutilized collector street currently, and it builds that kind of access from both sides of 104th and Melody into the new redevelopment area. We understand the potential of the taking of the homes and depicting that. Who knows when that opportunity comes around? And who knows if we approach somebody, maybe they would be happy with something like that.
I just want to make a comment on this one for Bannock. I'm okay with keeping that in there. I do think it's a good way to get additional access into the shopping centers and everything. And we're not going to be taking anybody's homes. I'm going to say that right now very strongly. We will not take anybody's homes for a project like that. If a property were to become vacant because the homeowner left, they put it on the market, we could acquire the property. We're not going to go in and condemn anybody's damn house. I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen for this.
Well, we've never had that discussion,
I know.
Yes.
So that on the Bannock one, sorry, Jean, I'm going to go against you on that one. I don't mind the additional connection into
My
there.
concern was the homes.
I know, but that would be if they became available, we could acquire them and then do it. We're not going to take anybody's homes by force. We're not going to go down and say, guess what, we're taking your house today. But just in general, I guess I'm feeling some of the same things that others are feeling with this plan. I've heard you say a couple of times tonight that this is an aspirational plan. When I see that, okay, I'm going to aspire to be this, that means I'm going to strive to do this, and this is what we want to do. And that's how you're putting it forward tonight, is this is the plan, this is what we're going to do with these streets. This is not gee, this is an idea that we could do at some point in time. This is, I'm aspiring to do this. And so I take exception to that. I know that's what you're saying, that that's not what it is, but your words tonight have said exactly that that's what this is going to do. I think cutting off those streets on Huron, absolutely not. You know, having a center median down Huron all the way and have it landscaped, no. I think on 104th it's okay. You know, I think it adds just too many cost constraints. You know, what I was hoping to see is, gee, south of 104th on Huron, the street looks like crap. What are we going to do to fix it? You know, there's areas where you can see dirt, you see gravel, you see some bits of grass here and there, you see the black landscaping there. Let's fix it. Let's make it look presentable for how it is now, and there's none of that in here. And that really disturbs me that we aren't looking at that, you know, and solutions to what we actually have our problems right now. So, you know, and I think that some of these things we've vetted time and time again, and we have said, not just this council, members of this council certainly, previous planning people have said, don't do this, and yet here it is here again anyways. So it kind of seems like we're being told it really doesn't matter what you think anyways. And of course, that's just my own personal feeling, so I'm not going to certainly not speak for anybody else, but that's how it feels to me, is that, you know, we've discussed it and we're told again, nope, it's in here anyways. So if this is to come to council next week, I will vote no. Just let you know that because to me it is what we're going to strive to do, and when we do these sections, this is what our plan is to do these things.
Mayor, maybe there are several things that have been, members of the council have objected to. Maybe if we could go down the list and reach consensus as to whether they ought to stay in or come out.
Right.
Because I don't want to see this plan not go forward because there are some objections to some of the items in it.
John, can I just say something real quick?
Sure.
I don't feel the same way as Kim. I don't feel like council's being circumvented here. You know, I feel like there are some things that maybe are controversial or you know, that we all want to agree on. But I want it to be put out there too, because I feel like you guys are going to be ragged on right now. I appreciate the forward thinking of what's going on here. Even if there is some things I don't agree with, I don't think there's anything intentional going on here that staff is ignoring council or anything like that. So I want it to be put out there that I appreciate your guys' work. So
I say one thing, the idea of the example that was just made about we're not going to take any homes. I think the point was made, the plan is here to say if that property became available and we have a plan that has suggested that we might want to consider this, that's what these plans, that's sort of the reason for these plans, to give you a decision-making tool, say, you know, in general, we think this is a good idea, but it might involve taking somebody's home and we'll never do that. Let's keep in the back of mind or the plan that if these opportunities are presented to us, we might want to consider moving forward. And that's, I mean, I think that's a great example of the intent of some of these plans.
And it's great to have a vision and that type of thing. The only thing about when you have site-specific, instead of just, this is what it's going to be for, a typical road might look like this, a typical fence might look like this, you're not site-specific. When you do that, and all I can think back is the industrial lighting days, and someone handed me a thing and showed me what it was going to look like with a 6-story building, and it was on our property. I took offense to that, you know? And so I could see someone doing the same thing. If you put yourself in their shoes, that's the only thing. So maybe, I mean, is it worth as much, the document worth as much? If it's not site specific, then that's, you know, I don't know, that's the issue.
So I guess to what John's saying, you know, you want to go through specific issues that we have and see if they stay in or if they don't stay in.
Yeah, I mean, that's a way of moving forward at any rate.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, like, I'd hate for, you know, Kim, for example, to be in a position where she has to vote against the entire plan because there's maybe one item in there. Well, but, you know what I mean? And the same thing with Jean, and for that matter, every member of council. So that would be my thought as a way of moving forward.
Can I also ask, do you feel like we could remedy the situation with some more preamble than we've added to it about it being aspirational or something that gets
Yeah.
investigated over top?
Use aspirational.
Okay, but is there some additional language we could change?
Well, I think that part of it too is I'm looking at it from our resident standpoint, not just from an elected official who has to make a decision on what we're doing, because we all get a lot more information. We all get more of the background and detail. We learn what planning is. We learn what all these different things are. Our residents typically, they don't have that same kind of in-depth knowledge of what's going on. And I think, so when I look at a lot of these things, that's what I'm looking at. How do we explain to our residents? How will our residents see or feel when they see this? You know, like Wayne said, you go take and just show them, hey, this is our plan. They're, as soon as they see a picture, they're going to say, that's what they're doing. And you can say, this is just a thought. Maybe we might do this down in the future, but that's not what our typical residents are going to think. So, you know, I agree with Kyle. You guys have done a lot of work in it, but I'm trying to think of it from a different angle.
It's managing the message.
That is a lot of it, yeah.
I get it.
Okay.
I've got at least notes on two
All right.
items, and one is the Bannock Street extension, and the other one is the plan for South Huron Street.
I've got a lot more, I just brought up two.
Okay.
So I'm thinking maybe we need to get more than just tonight, you know, or,
Yeah, maybe.
or not plan on having a reading on this right away. I mean, we need to go through this.
Let me tell you why I think it's so significant. We get, on all different subjects, we get memos from staff covering items that come before council. And many times you've all seen the little paragraph with a little sentence as referred to or as reference to this prior document or this prior action. And we look at the memo, we see this, then we see, oh, it was okay previously. And, oh, it must be okay now. And it taints everything, because this will be referred to undoubtedly over the years as this document, just like our comp plan is referred to. By the way, this is not, you shouldn't approve this zoning because it's not in our comp plan. Oh, was that comp plan good or bad? You know, it's the inference. So, yes.
I don't think we're ready yet.
Okay. Maybe we need to come back either with some suggestions, how to address these issues, or come back just to have a better understanding and discussion from the council about what the issues are that we need to look at.
Okay.
Okay.
What does the rest of council think? Yes?
I don't know, I kind of equate it with a comprehensive plan. I mean, it's a future planning document. As with the comprehensive plan, those things aren't written in stone either that say that they're either going to happen or not happen. They're, you know, maybe by the year 2035, this may occur. Maybe it's taking things too literally. So, I mean, I understand that people are opposed, so I guess I wouldn't move forward with so many opposed, but I'm kind of looking at it as what you guys brought it forward as, just a tool for the future and not setting it in stone, so.
Something I would add to staff is that the message that we're putting out, you know, because to Kim's point, I think it can easily get misconstrued, you know, to maybe an uneducated eye. And so, like O'Mara for me, I mean that, you know, I'm not in the planning process and I'm not versed in all that. And so when I saw that, you know, it brings up, like, I don't know what's going to go, you know, so if we can maybe look at how we can communicate this better to our constituents, the community, I think that's going to go a long ways.
You know, I was thinking, you know, maybe do some more outreach into the community. Maybe it's board meetings, maybe it's just one public meeting, just talking about what we want to do here, but and then get feedback. And maybe we're all wrong. I mean, you know, so just don't know. But I appreciate all your hard work. I mean, it took a lot of time, and I do appreciate everything you've done. And I actually like Bannock Street. I think, you know, the way that extension is, and many other things. So, but I think we need a little more work on it before we move forward.
I think what would be helpful for me is like some suggested language that could be on some of these pages, and we're just picking on page 42. But
right.
I feel like, well, I agree, it's like conceptual, and we don't know that O'Mara in 15, 20 years is gonna still be there. So what if their lot becomes available by their own doing, right? So
That's
then
right.
what does that look like? And I get that that's kind of like where that factors in, but I feel like then that's like, the language sitting over here in the corner on a specific page, that might help other council members feel more comfortable with that. I think I'd feel more comfortable if there was language near some of those areas, but I agree, like with Huron and a couple other streets, I think there's some.
Anybody else? No? Okay.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Feedback, and we'll get back with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and in Denver, I mean, if you go down to around Alameda and Downing and Clarkson and some of those streets, they've actually converted some of the streets one way, each way, and there's a lot of things you can still do as far as the planning goes, so.
You know the old saying, your street first.
That's all right. Actually, I would like my street.
Generically.
I know, but I'm
If you're
just
willing to
saying.
do it, it might be worth it.
Actually,
See you
Gene,
later.
it's not a bad idea because I have a lot of
I'm talking about
traffic
any
issues.
idea.
I understand, I'm only teasing you, but I'm just saying they could block it off. Okay. All right. Vantage Point School Zone at Huron Street and Kennedy Drive.
You sure you wanted to go up there?
I don't have anything as elaborate as those last two. Good evening, Mayor and council
Good
members.
evening.
I authored a memo tonight on the Vantage Point here on Kennedy Street, school zone for Kim and Jean. I think maybe if council would indulge me, I'll just go through my memo and kind of give you the highlights and the information that I have here and then open it up for discussion, if that's okay.
I need more time to get ready. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, so our staff has gotten requests on basically the school zone, everything from flasher times to I guess all the way up to whether it's warranted or not. So I asked staff to open up a traffic operation request, and in doing so, the first thing that the staff did was go visit the school, and to our surprise, we found that there were 4 schools operating out of there, and that Adams 12 had conveyed to us, at least the 5 years that I had been working here prior, they would give us a start time, an end time, and then a very large time in the middle part of the day, which in effect kept the school zone lights flashing for what I would say an inordinate amount of time. So that was a good discovery on our part, and the first thing we did was adjust the flashers so that they more closely matched the start and the end times for all the schools, and you have that as one of your exhibits in your memo. I can certainly explain that in a little bit more detail. The second thing we did was we looked at the school zone itself, and we believe that the school zone is especially on Huron, is too long, and I think to meet manual uniform traffic control devices, we are suggesting to council that we shrink the school zone down to a more appropriate length that's fitting for the school and meets national standards. If we did that, we'd have to move 2 of the flashing lights at the tune of about $10,000 each. We believe the school zone that runs east and west from the intersection of Huron on Kennedy is an appropriate spot. And then lastly, I have some documentation there. We've done 3 days of pedestrian counts and basically hug-and-go drop-offs. If you recall the school, we have an aerial overlay. There's basically on the northbound lane, there's a turnout where we have parents and buses that drop off kids there. So that's the situation. We believe the school zone is appropriately set up if we make those changes in the flashing lights. If council, I'm looking for direction to council if they want to do that or more. If you want to do just the moving of the flashing lights to a more appropriate standard to meet national codes, like I said, I'd go out for bid and look for contractors to bid moving those 2 lights. We just replaced the one in Fox Run for $7,500, so I'm guessing 10 for these. But so we'd have to do 1 for each side, 1 for the southbound, 1 for the 2 for the southbound lanes, rather.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Sorry, just real quick. So now that we've acknowledged the fact that maybe the flashers are flashing too long and the flashers are placed inappropriately based on code, will this have any effect on tickets that have been issued or are going to be issued in the future? based on that so you're saying that we're not gonna make this change until the end of the school year. So if there's a ticket issued in that zone during this time between the change, I mean, can we potentially have an issue on our hands? Because
I would defer to the chief, but I would say at this particular point, a school, there are some, again, it's a standard to go by, and if it's, I think the school standards is 200 feet either side of the school, and if it's 250 or 300 feet, schools do vary that. Depending on what kind of activities happen around the school. If you notice, the school zone flashers, I think that were originally set up was for the track. Now, if the track was actively used in sports and things like that, occasionally I see football there or Pop Warner or something like that. I don't think it gets the same effect as it would for Mountain View High School that's further north up on Huron Street. So I feel comfortable that shrinking the school zone it would be an okay thing to do. I don't think it would affect, the tickets have already been written there for the school zones there, because one could argue in the past that that's what the school zone was set up purposely for, a more active high school there.
So I know we don't have like the background as to necessarily understanding the why, but I'm just curious. Like, it seems to me like the into school zone continued past the light, where on the other side of the track. And so are we saying that we're moving it to end before the track? Or, I mean, before the,
right at the end of the school there?
Right, yeah, right at the intersection there.
Right. You're gonna move it to there?
I believe
because it ends after the pedestrian light currently, beyond the track. So there's the bike path, there's the light, and so it ends on the other side of that. So in my mind, I'm thinking that the theory was put it behind it because kids would walk to the light to cross over. I get it. I mean, I drive down this constantly and I see it's like, there's not one kid on the street. And so I do get it, but at the same time, I'm just not sure on that side.
David, can you tell me, how did this come forward? Was it residents complaining, or is it just something you guys decided was an issue? I guess.
It was Kim and I complaining from constant barrage over the last 2 years.
So it's residents that are driving, okay. I just didn't know how it came forward.
But we've had requests, I think at one point we actually turned them off or something like that, and then we had a request from the schools to turn them back on.
I was just going to ask, I mean, I drive through there and I don't see a kid either, but I wondered, did you talk to anybody at the school district, Rob Weber or anybody?
And not particularly about the safety issues there. We talked to the school about when their start times were, and we, like I said, I had an engineer out there 3 days, and we monitored and took ped counts and vehicle counts. So, I mean, we know what the usage is of the school.
How do students get there? I mean, you get a total in the morning of 31 hug-and-go counts, you know? I know, that's like, I mean, compared to some of these other schools you go to where there's hundreds of cars pulling up, and this one's got 31. And to me, I would guess there's got to be 600 kids go there maybe, huh?
You see them on
I don't know.
Yeah, I know, but how do they walk there then? I mean, you don't see them walking there, so.
There's small buses and such dropping them off.
Yeah, there's a parking lot off of Huron Street that I think gets utilized as well.
Okay.
Or off of Kennedy Street, rather.
Gotcha, okay.
You know, and my thing on this is, we know it's an issue, it's not a very costly fix, I don't think. And one of my biggest concerns, and the reason why Gina and I, one of the reasons we wanted to bring it forward now is, why do we have to wait until the end of the school year? I mean, I haven't gotten a reason why that is necessary, especially if we're shortening a school zone. People aren't going to complain that the school zone is shorter.
Well, it's a matter of, I guess, typical policy, which I would say would be safe and prudent to do it that way. I mean, one is, even though you say there's 31 cars that use the hug-and-go, there are a number of buses as well, and one of the constraints off the roadway is that hug-and-go has a very sharp turn, and if we move the lights or change the lights, I'm just afraid that it increases the probability for accidents there. And I think the best thing to do is wait until after the school year, let the school kids, so they're not affected by this when the contractors are out there and just do it at that particular time. If I have to bid it at this particular point right now, if should council want to move ahead with it, I mean, it'll be after school before I could get it done anyway.
Could I ask a clarification on these numbers? The pedestrian count, east and west, top one is 1, middle is 4, and the bottom is 7. Is that physically people crossing here on?
That's correct.
In each instance?
Yeah.
They're ghosts. As much as I'm there, I haven't seen one of those people. I'm gonna go look. I'm gonna stake them out. Yeah,
Bring a
I
chair.
want to see who crosses the street. Okay, now, on Kennedy, that part is terrible. I mean,
That's heavy duty.
you know, but it still doesn't justify punching through the other street. But anyway,
You get that large group of kids on Kennedy that smoke or have
yeah, back and forth. Yeah.
So do we have to go out on bid for this because it's $10,000? We don't have a contractor we can just hire? Is that why we would have to go out and bid?
There's, anything over $5,000, we're supposed to get formal quotes for it. The likelihood here is we're only going to get 2 bidders. It's going to be Sturgeon or WL. But I would suggest the council it's not going to take that much time. I can certainly get those 2 bids fairly quickly. And like I said, in fact, we just did one at Fox Run.
Right, that's why I guess you're concerned about safety by doing this. Well, then why wouldn't that be a good issue later? Because the buses aren't going to be there when you move them? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's a very long project. How long is it going to take them to move those signs or to install new signs?
Once we order the parts, we'll probably do one of both signs in a day, I would think. Are they photo, right? Photo optic, Ken? Photo? Solar?
For me, I still think we should be contacting the school just to even inform them we're doing this, see if they have any objections at all. I mean,
Well, I would certainly do that.
Yeah,
I want to hear
well,
from you
you know.
whether you wanted to do it or not. I mean, I think the flashes are okay where they're at. I would recommend that at this point in time, if council wanted to make a decision, I would say that there would be no ill effect by shrinking the school zone. But I would certainly vet that through the school.
Can I?
We ordered from Foxconn was 6 to 8 week time, 6 to 8 week lead time, so we're still away
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are. I was just wondering, so the 2 in red on this diagram are the ones that we're looking to remove? The 40 to change it back to 40 miles, or is that where you're putting the flasher, moving the flasher to, the 2 red ones?
It's the ones that are on the way up by the pedestrian, the trail crossing, the Farmers Highline crossing, up on the north side of the track. Those end school zone and the flashing lights are way, way up out of the school zone. And, I drive to Atlanta Bread quite frequently in the lunchtime hour, and, I see drivers are frustrated because they get into the school zone and it seems like they're driving forever before they get to Kennedy.
So this one, you're gonna move down here.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? This
That's
one, you're moving
correct.
down here? And
Right,
what are we doing here on the lower one?
The flasher that are on the southbound lanes would move down to the southbound where you see it there, and then the end school zone would be symmetrically across from that on the northbound lane, directly across from the track there.
So,
I was just gonna say, sorry, Wayne.
No, go ahead.
Anytime I drive through there, the number of people who are going the school limit is 1. And I get honked at constantly and flipped off driving through there because people are like, and I'm like, right back at them.
What is this?
Because it's school zone. So,
right here, you have the cost for the work is approximately $10,000. That's per sign, is that what you said?
For the flashing sign, right?
Yeah, and you do two of those then?
20 total.
Yeah, 20.
Okay.
I say move forward as
That's
soon
what
as
I'd say,
possible.
too.
Just get it done.
anything else from anyone? Any other comments?
I'm still not getting, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be quick, but this lower 40, that's really, it's like kind of catty corner from the school. I don't know how far that proximity is, but it looks rather close. That one there?
Yeah, that's on the southbound lane. That would be the end of the school zone.
it's the end of the school zone. But I mean, it looks like it's literally just really close to it.
It's right across the street.
It's before you even hit Kennedy. Why are we looking to change the school zone right at Kennedy?
I'd have to look at that a little closer. Like I said, it was an exhibit I wanted to bring to council that we could shrink the school zone. I will draw it to scale, and I'll certainly go to the school and vet this through the school and get their feedback.
I mean, I can see changing it right after Kennedy, but it just seems like right before the crosswalk even would be. It seems premature to put it there to me, unless I'm just missing something here.
I agree, I don't understand it either.
You want to move south of Kennedy?
Just right after you get past Kennedy, then you can speed up after you get through the stoplight, you know?
Right next to the church.
Yeah, it's down
Right.
farther
Now,
right now.
I have a quick question, Dave. So, are the current flashers, are they wired in or are they solar too?
I believe they're wired now.
They're wired in, the current ones are? Okay. And it's too cost prohibitive to do the wiring or to reuse the signs and just move them?
We have an estimate to physically move them with the wire, it's like $37,000 for one.
So from now on, any flashes that we do, are we gonna do solar so that if we come up with an issue, maybe, because solar they're just transferable to any pole, right?
Well, it could be, however available, however maybe less expensive.
I don't know of too many solar. I don't know. This might be the first one in Fox Run.
Okay. I like solar, it just seems like they're easily transferable.
You know, and if council wants to move, I suppose we could ask WL to do this. Like I said, typically our procurement procedures require formal bids, and we got that, but I could certainly do that off of WL. The maintenance signal contract, I would have to come back for a contract amendment sometime later this year, probably.
Okay. Anybody else?
One question though, what if the school wants to keep the school flashers the way they are?
I guess we have to have the conversation.
Yeah, I think we should find out why. I mean, based upon your counts and your information, it doesn't seem like it would be justifiable.
Then when the residents complain, tell them to call the school. I mean, it's
school's
going to be one or the other. They're going to complain to council, or they're going to complain to the school.
This is a classic example of, it's hard to just pick and choose one or two things, and that's one of the reasons, like in Northmore, we looked at the entire school, all the right-of-way around the school property. We analyzed it thoroughly and made a full-scale recommendation rather than just little pieces and parts like this. So it's really difficult to make changes once they're already installed in the right-of-way, because if one party prefers things a little bit differently than the school system, then it makes for a difficult situation. So I brought this to council tonight on behalf of Gene and Kim, and I wanted to see what your reaction was, and I will certainly talk to the school before I moved any signs. And like I said, that's a reason I'd like to do it if everybody agrees at the end of the school year.
Okay. And after you get some information from the school, could you just send us a little memo to just let us know what their comments are? Okay, but if anything other than negative from the school, I think we should start moving forward.
And just, I really do want you to consider moving that 140 right after Kennedy, if you would consider that, or at least look at it, and see why you put it there.
I'm not sure why that ended up right there. It might be something that one of our engineers decided would be more appropriate there than the other side of the light, but let me look into it, and I'll let you know.
They wanted to block my view coming out of Kennedy.
That's what it was.
Yeah, you don't want it behind the traffic light. You don't want it far enough away on either side. So let me look into that. I'll get back to council on that, and also in my interview with the school.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anything else? Hearing none? We're adjourned.